So thanks again for coming. And today we're in the second part of our Getting Published portion of the writing class. Today we'll be having a panel discussion about peer review. And before we start our panel discussion, I'd like to talk about what we're going to do today. Today the focus is on understanding what editors and peer reviewers like and don't like to see in a manuscript. I figure you'd rather hear it from them than from me. I've never done peer review, so I've only sent things out for peer review. And understanding the peer review process and how best to address the reviewer's comments. It probably would be helpful for you to hear that information from somebody who does peer review and who sees the revisions and decides if those are acceptable or not. And also, I would like our peer reviewers to discuss what it looks like on their end, because many of you probably have never done peer review before. You're not familiar with the new the online systems that are used and what it's like. So just a description of what it looks like to do peer review. And the state of mind. I always stress that the peer reviewers are extremely busy and have very little time, and so you want to make it easy on their eyes when they're reading your manuscript. So that's something to keep in mind. A reminder before we get started also, if you have any manuscripts in progress, it could be an abstract, anything that you're working on, something for AHA or any conference coming up, please send it to me by August 13th, and I'll put you in a book giveaway. And we'll be doing peer editing of these manuscripts in our last two classes in August, and that's our writing lab. So it's a good chance to practice what we've been learning in the class. I'll send you these resources on our group email, but I never got a chance to talk to you about retractions. And the number of retractions in the medical and scientific literature has risen sharply. And part of that, there's a lot of conversation about that in the publication world right now on why that is, but it seems in general to be due to awareness of fraud, of plagiarism, and both on the part of the authors and on the part of the institutions and journals. And so I'm just going to be sending you these links. If you want to see whether a paper that you have cited in a manuscript was had a correction or retraction, it's kind of hard to find. It's not obvious. And so there is a good link from the National Library of Medicine that tells you how to do that. Another group, there's a watchdog group, which if you want to know who's, I would say, getting more and more prominent in the publishing world, academic publishing world, I would say Retraction Watch. Ivan Oransky is the head of that group, and he gives a lot of talks all over the place about retractions. His group is trying to increase the transparency on the journal side for why articles are getting retracted. A lot of times journals do not have a clear statement on why something is retracted. So as an author, if you're you're writing a manuscript and you want to cite a paper, you don't know whether it was a tiny little error or if it was some major type of fraud that was going on, like somebody falsified the data or they changed the figure. And you don't know, unless the journal tells you, and oftentimes they won't, you don't know what to cite. And what he compares it to is if you look in law, and let's say you're a lawyer arguing a case in court, and you cite a court case, and you cite, and it turns out that court case was overturned because of some error or fraudulent thing that happened, then your argument would be null. And that's not really the case in science. But you have to think about it. We're writing things and doing research that is affecting manufacture of new drugs. What is the correct dosage for patients and these kind of things. There's no easy way to find out if something was retracted or why it was retracted. So they just recently got a large grant from the MacArthur Foundation to create a database for people to make it easier to find out what papers were retracted and why. So that's why I'm sending you that link. And now my clicker's not working. Huh.
So what if you cite an article that's been retracted? You don't know. I mean, sometimes you put in like 50 references.
Right.
So what do you do in that situation?
There's a problem there because oftentimes, I mean, that happens all the time. And first off, you don't know that it was retracted. And if you do find out later, you often can't find out why. I do not have a good answer for you right now, and that's what the group at Retraction Watch is trying to fix. If you read the National Library of Medicine statement, they have kind of some generic instructions on how to do a search in PubMed or Medline, but it's not user-friendly, I don't feel like, and that's what Retraction Watch is trying to make, a user-friendly database so that you get an alert when something that you cited was retracted. Okay.
Well, if that's the biggest problem you have in your paper, you're probably okay.
Okay. Yeah, my clicker's not clicking.
That's a problem.
Yeah. And I tried on the laptop, it's not advancing either.
Okay, so that's a
I just have a couple more slides and then we'll start our panel discussion.
Okay. It's off.
I think it froze up.
Yeah, it looks that way. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Where were you?
Oh, is it working now?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay, so the next class we're going to have a talk about reporting patient data. We'll have a guest speaker from our clinical side in the Heart Center. And so let's get into a talk about peer review. This is the image that a lot of authors have of peer review. There's a lot of angst when your paper is out for peer review. You feel like it's being ripped to shreds. And here's a good cartoon I found of, I don't know if you can read it, so I'll read some of the smaller writing, but here's your manuscript as submitted, just the standard vehicle, right? And here's your manuscript after peer review and revision. So you have your minor revisions. There's a little umbrella poking out the back there. You have more replicates as needed. They added some tires. Add necessary circular and triangular windows because the reviewer number 3 sells odd-shaped windows. Please try the alternate approach, which is the sled mode on the car. And latest top-mounted laser cannon, just because. The front windshield needs to be removed or tinted red. And my favorite one is the horse hitch, because that's how we always did it. So those are the types, that's how authors often feel when they look at the peer review comments and they say, are you serious? You want me to do this to my manuscript? And here's an even darker view of the peer review process, where you put it's the censormatic, where you put in your scientific research and you have reduction, political manipulation, simplification, sugarcoating, and fact elimination, and then out the end is the published results. But as I've explained before, and Dr. Winters has mentioned in our previous discussions, peer review tends to greatly improve the manuscript and improve the quality of the publication. So today I invited a group of people who are peer reviewers and editors at different journals to speak about their experiences in the peer review process, and you can ask questions. That's what we'll spend the rest of this session doing. And so I have Dr. Winters, Dr. Reisner, Dr. Pratt, and Dr. Quinones.
You want to come up there?
No, you're welcome to sit here. We have you, you can stay at the table and discuss. And I have some questions.
Not formally.
And so I gave people some sample questions just to get the conversation started, but you can ask whatever you want, and they can answer if they feel like it.
When you pass in the questions, very, very simple rule that if there are publications prior to use relative to the topic, the important discovery is that you are actually either duplicating or improving or working on, give those people credit. Because it's nothing more difficult to manage a reviewer that is very upset because you did not tell them and they have done some important work on the field. That starts with wrong foot. So be sure that you have the literature search well, and you don't have to give 20,000 references, but there's some key ones. You don't want to remove, and you don't want to appear as the first one to discover something. And there's been some real good work 4 or 5 years before.
Especially if that's your longtime competitor. Should have been on the record.
Not a good thing to start with.
Well, the other side of that coin is that it's very likely that one of those people working in your field that you're may be the reviewer.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
That's exactly why I said that.
and so one of the nicest things is for them to see their work quoted,
Maybe even
and they're a lot
compliment.
softer on the critique of yours.
If you get a chance,
Be generous with your referencing others in the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in the real world, the ideal world, your manuscript would be reviewed by someone who's an expert in your particular field. For our journal, which is basically a review journal, we have a relatively small field of reviewers, and are not always expert in the subject matter they're reviewing. So they become, they become reviewers in the sense of looking at the manuscript and how it's constructed, how it's laid out, how it reads, how the grammar is, as well as the subject matter, and does it make sense to them. Occasionally, if they are an expert in their field, they may or may not comment on the content. But so what we get back are comments mainly on the quality of the paper as a whole. And as Susan said a minute ago, 9 times out of 10 comments will come back that will strengthen the paper. For instance, read a paper that may have a lot of facts in it. It's easy to take some of those facts and put them in a table or a graph or something that people wouldn't be able to see and grasp more quickly than trying to read something. So the reviewers for different kinds of journals review them really in different ways.
That's a good point. You all have worked as editors and peer reviewers at different journals. Would you mind taking turns briefly giving an overview of which journals you've participated in and in what capacity? So I know, obviously, Dr. Winters, you're editor-in-chief of our journal.
In years past, there was a journal called Echocardiography that I was an editor on. I've not been a reviewer on a lot of journals. I reviewed, well, actually I have. I guess I reviewed articles for the circulation in the past, Jack in the past. Al, how about you?
I was on the editorial board of circulation of Jack briefly and reviewing for most of the interventional cardiology journals now. And they're all very different. And when you read an article as a reviewer, you have to look not only at the paper itself, but the audience of that journal and the criteria that that journal establishes. So there are some journals that are extremely rigid and extremely difficult to get something published, and the reviewers have an obligation to make sure that those few papers that they pass are top quality. And then there are others, and fortunately now there are so many journals that you could hit the range of what you think your paper is worth. But there are other journals where the reviewer audience is less critical, where the journal itself wants to publish more. In fact, some journals have trouble getting enough articles to publish. So rule number one that I would advise of somebody sending a paper to a journal is to wisely pick your journal. Don't take the approach that, well, let's try New England Journal first. If they reject it, we'll go to Circulation. If they reject it, we'll go to Jack. If they reject it, because you just waste months and months. So pick something that's reasonable for the paper that you're presenting.
And Al, you can get the same reviewer twice if you try that.
Yeah, I have sometimes sent some very short reviews. I already reviewed this paper.
3 times you have.
Yes, and rejected it twice. So, yeah, be honest about your own study. Yeah. Match the quality of your science and your study to an appropriate journal. That's what the rest I say. That's very.
And follow the instructions of the journal. I can't tell you how many times, even in our journal, people do not follow the instructions. And we have to send it back and say, oh, we need this, or we need that, or the references are all listed wrong. You've got to follow otherwise that will reject it instantly.
So, and on those lines, Dr. Sobby and I had the opportunity, I guess in the 90s, to be associate editors for Circulation. Because Circulation had 10 years that their office was in Houston because Willerson was the editor-in-chief. And of course, all the associate editors were in the region. Bill and I were part of that group for imaging. And I don't know if they're still doing it, but at that time, initially, every single paper was for review. And the journal was inundated with papers that, you know, if you really took one quick look at it, you know it was never going to be. So it took us a while, but we actually convinced Dr. Willerson to allow us, the associate editor, to make a decision ourselves. So that helped a lot. So if it was an imaging paper, he would go to Bill and I, we would look at the paper, and we really, knowing circulation, knowing what circulation wants, you know, and knowing the quality of the paper, tell them, you know, it's never going to make it. We would quickly send them right back a very brief paragraph to the authors, and within a week they would receive results. And first, that helped a lot, diffuse, you know, bring back the backlogs because we could move papers quickly, and it helped the authors because they got a quick response and they had to do something else. And I don't remember still doing it, but I thought that, and many journals are beginning to take that approach where the associate editors are given the permission to do that. So if you get a response very quickly, that's probably what it is, and it's usually very short. Because otherwise it goes through a process, and you get these papers from journals, and you take a look at them, and they're never going to make it. You still have to generate a frequent review, which takes time from everybody. The system gets overloaded. And I think Jack is still sending everything, because I have received from Jack stuff that your first look, you will never make it. So I don't know that Jack has instituted that policy. But circulation did, and I don't know if they still have it. But we thought it was a very good way of keeping the ball running a little faster.
I think it's true that if you become successful in getting manuscripts published, and your reputation grows as a good writer, a good researcher, it becomes a little easier to get someone's attention to look at it, because the more likely you are to get it published. I remember when I was at your stage of your career, I was in Philadelphia, and I was at Temple Medical School, and there was a man there. The chief of cardiology was a man whose name was Louis Soloff, who was a really, really bright guy, and he was very opinionated. He was a hell of a good doctor. I learned an awful lot from him. But he became non persona gratis at the circulation for comments he made about, I don't know about what, but he could not get a paper submitted and approved for circulation the whole time I was there. Mainly because he didn't follow the rules, and people didn't like what he said. So politics can play a role.
Oh, yeah.
If you get on the wrong side of someone, you're in trouble.
But many journals now ask if you would like to suggest a reviewer. And that's a big step forward, because first of all, often many of these people are people that are already reviewing for that journal. Second, they're more knowledgeable in the field if you know that they're in the field. And I think you get a fairer review now than in those days where it just went into this bin and was shipped out. The other thing that I think has changed over the years is the anonymous authorship of articles. That most journals, you'll get an article to review, you won't know who the author or authors are. And so you tend to approach this a little bit more objectively and fairly than the son of a bitch that you So, I mean, the process is much fairer now, both by being able to request a reviewer and the reviewer not knowing who you are. Good guess.
The interesting thing is that it has not taken off.
The what?
That approach has not taken off. It happens, but still the majority tend to still be fully online. Well, you know who the authors are. So when that approach came in, we thought it was going to go like that.
Yeah.
Everybody will love it and will be doing it. It really hasn't really taken off. It happens, but it's not like, wow. And I think there's a lot of mixed feelings about it, because if you are, let's say you're working with Dr. Kleiman and something like that, okay? Is it an advantage to reviewers know that you're working from Kleiman's lab, or a disadvantage? So
Probably a disadvantage.
well, it's interesting. So, well, I know, but it could be. It could be if it happens to be something that is in disagreement with the reviewer, and happens to be some other thing like that. No. That's the whole business. But for what it's worth, still the majority of articles that at least I get from the typical circulation Jack and other places have the authors, not the homeland, So
The other side
is
is
kind of interesting, because I thought initially that I was going to just take off.
The other thing is having the reviewers have the choice of whether or not they want to reveal who they are. Some journals do that. I don't know if that's a growing trend or.
It is. eLife is one of the ones that does that. And I went to the Council of Science Editors conference where journal editors were discussing this new model of revealing to the other reviewers. Like if you have 3 reviewers for one manuscript, they would know who each other
The
is.
reviewers will know who they are.
Right.
Not the authors.
Well, I'm not familiar with the authors knowing who the reviewers are, but I'm familiar with the model where the reviewers know each other, and what the purpose for that model is to reduce abuse, because sometimes reviewers will go off the rails in their comments and make kind of abusive comments,
Right.
and they won't do that as much if they have colleagues. That other people are going to know their name. They're not anonymous. But are you talking about if the authors know who the reviewers are?
No, you ask. Are you giving permission to let the authors know who you are?
Yeah, I have review for journals. I have a little place I can click if I want to grant permission for the authors to know that I reviewed it.
Okay, I'm not as familiar with
I don't know how
that
many
model, and I
reviewers
don't
click
think
it.
they feel very comfortable with that. Yeah.
Well, most journals will have in the review, that when you make the review, you make your comments to the editors and then your comments to the authors.
Correct.
And they may not be this. They may say the same thing, only in different ways.
Yeah.
I can tell you that Lois DeBakey, who you don't know, but is probably the guru of medical communication, writing, editing. When we started our journal and I talked to her, she was adamant that the authors should know who the reviewers are. Now, we haven't taken that rule. We haven't taken that road. But she's written several articles on how the reviewers should be known to the authors. Mike, I don't think most journals do that, though, do they?
Correct.
Yeah.
I have one suggestion, might be kind of fun, to go around for all 4 of us and see what our number 1 and number 2 peeves are. And what is the most irritating 1 or 2 things when you review papers that you find?
That's a great idea.
Might be fun to start with Bill.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the number 1 is that they don't follow directions, and we have to send them back because they're not put in the proper form. Number 2 is their poor grammar. You would be surprised, now maybe you wouldn't be, how poor Americans write. It's astounding to me. So those 2 things get my attention right off the bat.
I would have to say my number 1 gripe is an overreach of the conclusions, the findings you present, but then in the discussion, the extension of those findings way beyond what is reasonable. And that won't cause me to reject a manuscript, but it would cause me to downgrade it or to ask for major revision. That's the number 1 issue that I have. And I think the other is just too long a manuscript. You have to realize what the reviewer doesn't want to spend the whole evening on that one thing, and the readers don't want to, have one article in the whole journal to read. So those are the two major gripes I have. Neither of which would make me reject an article, but both of which would make me request major revisions.
Mine is wasting my time.
What?
Mine is when I feel they're wasting my time. And you're wasting my time if you're discovering the wheel. If you show that you really don't know what the hell you're doing, you don't know the subject, you have not given any thought to what you're doing. Those things just annoy me because I still have to run a review. It's a waste of my time.
It's getting mad right now.
Because I just wasted my time. I had to actually do a long review because I still had to go through the review process because, it was fairness for the journal. It was a waste of my time. That's aggravating.
My number one pet peeve, especially in controlled clinical trials that are a major proportion, that instead of saying that a trial turned out negative in the conclusion, especially in the abstract, there's a flowery phrase of saying something like, there's interesting trends in this data. I mean, I don't think the journal should ever allow it. Even the New England Journal has a lot of these that allow them to make an editorial comment, and there was no data to support it. So that drives me nuts. I think the other thing is, I hate seeing information in the discussion that's never been presented in the methods or the results. When somebody says, and by the way, what supports this is if you take blank and you do blank from our data, it just drives me nuts when they insist on adding new information to the discussion. And thirdly, I think people do a piecemeal job discussion the limitations, especially the statistical limitations of their studies. Those are my big ones. There are others.
Whenever you get a manuscript all done, you think it's just right, you take it quietly aside sometime and read it again. And invariably you'll find something that you can improve upon.
Absolutely. That's a very good one.
That's when you think that finally, when it's going to get better, read it again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point, but it's also a problem because each time you read it, you find something else that you like. So at some point, you got to cut the cord and
say it's good enough to go.
I've spent months and months on papers that I could have submitted way sooner, but you change your mind about this item or that item. So you just got to cut loose at some point.
Do you have any comments or advice on how authors should address peer review comments? What do you like to see in the revisions, and how, when they write the letter to the editor addressing, reviewer 1, reviewer 2, reviewer 3's comments, is there a best practice for authors?
I can tell you one thing you do not want to do, and that is take umbrage with whatever comments you get. We don't have that, doesn't happen to us much, but a couple of years ago we had a paper that was published and it was reviewed, and I thought reviewed very well, and the author took great umbrage about the comments that were made, and we published the paper, but not without a letter to the author describing why we thought the comments were improved the paper, and that particular author better get used to the idea that the reviewers wouldn't always be complimentary. So don't be upset with what you hear. Just address it in a straightforward manner. You may not like it, but take it for what it's worth.
I would say don't confuse your ego with your goal.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Don't let your ego get in the way.
I would start your response by saying, we appreciate the thorough and thoughtful review by reviewer number 1.
Even if you're gagging yourself.
Even if you really feel it. But always treat the reviewer respectfully, and you could disagree, you could give reasons for disagreeing, but if your tone is a nice conciliatory tone, then the reviewer has a better opportunity to say, okay, I see his point. It's not a major criticism I had. We'll let it. Politeness in your response, crucial.
Absolutely. Very.
Well, we should appreciate the hard work they do. It is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very important. Don't fight with the reviewer. Even if you disagree, there are ways to make a point. The other thing is, if a reviewer really found a major flaw and gives you a recommendation to improve your paper by doing something, don't answer back with an excuse of medical. That's not good. Really have should invest time in those people. Or basically quit and decide you want to go to another job. But don't come back with some sort of going around trying to say, and now in this resource section, we inserted this sentence and try to go around, and at the end of the day, still you haven't done what they requested. It's just not done to plan. Now, you may have a disagreement with that request, okay, which may be valid. If you have a disagreement with the request, you think really that either it cannot be done because you don't have the way to do it, or you don't think it should be done, then as polite as you can, you basically express your reasons for why you think maybe. But there are times that a reviewer is really trying to help you, and it's making some suggestion that it may require you to invest a little time going back and doing some of the things. But if you don't do it, it's not. Don't waste your time and using excuses. Now it's a balance of you might suggest that maybe you go back and do a few more experiments on these things and maybe increase your sample size or something like that. It's good. If a reviewer is trying to help you, most of the time those suggestions are doable. They're not things that cannot be done. You may not want to do them because it might add more work for you, but they're doable. It's always a little fine line on when to accept the recommendation and when not to accept it. But quite often reviewers are going to give you pretty decent recommendations. That, your paper will be strengthened if you analyze it a little better or they're trying to help you.
I think that's a good point. Reviewers often will find something that you never thought of, or at least if you thought of it, you didn't put it into the paper. So following positive suggestions is crucial.
What about, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to bring up about, as an author, if you receive a rejection, let's say the associate editor rejects the manuscript, I've seen before where an author will kind of appeal. They'll send a letter to that editor and say, maybe you didn't maybe I did not word the paper in the right way, and trying to get the editor to reconsider the manuscript and actually send it out for review. Do you all have experience with that? Is that a good practice if you really feel like your manuscript was misunderstood?
As an author, I've never done it.
When John Kelson's score in the ER paper, we resubmitted 3 times after a letter to the editor, please reconsider because of the following reasons. That's the only one, that's the closest one.
To the same journal.
Yeah.
Did it work?
So it was a full rejection?
Yeah, John could give you the details.
Well, the first time was a full rejection, not a major revision time, but a full rejection.
My memory was a full rejection.
And then you appealed it by making them aware of it, maybe look at this.
Largest Kelson score paper they've ever seen, and blah, blah, blah. It was written very nicely. Dr. Marian's temper did not show up all the time.
Boy, that required a lot of mentorship.
No required secretary.
So I guess you have proof of that at least in one situation.
I think, but I think it's a rocky road, and the chance of falling off the cliff is very high. And I'm not sure it was all worth it after a lot of time. We probably could have had it submitted and published somewhere else.
Somewhere else?
You can get an idea from the letter that the editor sends to you of where your papers stand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's either an outright rejection, and you're talking about somebody appealing that. That's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah.
Then you get we cannot accept your paper, but consider revisions, etc. And then we're interested in your paper, but would like you to respond to the reviewers, or we like your paper. There are basically 4 different levels, and anyone except the outright rejection, I think it's worth resubmitting. But the outright rejection, you may have cited one paper.
Well, we had a desire to get that particular calcium score paper into the major ER journal. So there was a lot of reasons to want to push it. I think John may have made a phone call first. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, there's no, actually, that's, yeah, a personal appeal.
No,
Before you outright reject this, I just want to remind you, because that probably had nothing to do with it.
you know, on occasion, an editor with the rejection will recommend another journal to send it to. It's probably not often, but occasionally.
I have done it.
Yeah.
For example, I have been reviewing for Jack, and I thought it was a lot more appropriate for Jack imaging, and I have made that recommendation. So I have done that as a review.
Yeah.
But you've accepted first. And then
No.
it's only
I-
provable if they change.
Well, I just, I have not accepted it. I have, it's been as, I have felt that, for example, I have seen some papers in ECHO that were very technical, were more in terms of methods, technical things, and they were sent to, let's say, Jack. And they would have been a lot more appropriate for a case. So I have rejected it, nicely, and then said, perhaps you also should consider sending it to a journal that deals specifically with ECHO. He said yes. So yes, maybe they should go to very specific journal.
One last topic before we go. We haven't talked about is the title. The title, in my judgment, is something you should do at the end of whatever else you've done. And the title is really important. And you want to be sure that it's succinct, it lays out what the paper is about, but in as few words as you can make it. You sometimes see titles that ramble on for 2 or 3 lines. By the time you get to the end of the sentence, you don't even know what it's about. So the title, along with the abstract, are things you're going to probably do at the very end of, just before you're getting ready to send it into somebody.
A title should not be a run-on sentence.
Right.
A run-on sentence where you just do comma, dash.
Another thing is to think about is the number of authors. Now, I don't know how all journals handle this, but sometimes you get authors and you'll see 6 or 8 names listed, and you wonder whether all other than clinical trials, of course, but a single manuscript, a single research project that has 6 or 8 names on it. You wonder what role all those people played in the production of that paper. And some journals will not. I don't know, maybe that's not, I was going to say some journals don't always publish all the authors, but I'm not sure that's right. I guess they do publish them. But you want to be sure the people who are on the manuscript really play a role. It's called ghost writing otherwise, and that's a no-no.
There are some specific rules and definitions of authorship.
Right. Yeah.
And every instructions of all journals have what that is.
Right.
You can be considered an author if you A, B, C, D, E, some of them.
Most journals defer to the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. They have a statement, and I think I sent that out in the group email. But yeah.
And they also list how references should be cited, and that's important because one of the biggest problems Shelley Barnes, who was a copy editor, does is to go through the references and be sure they're listed properly. That takes her a lot of time if they're not. So following directions, I can't tell you how important following directions is.
Can I make one comment on selection of journal and why things are so different today? If you are writing something because you want you're thinking of promotion within your institution and you want it at the highest journal level, that's one thing. If you're writing something and you want it published so that it's out in public, it's a different story. And now with the internet, where people don't pick up Jack to look for an article, but instead they go to Google and they dial in a topic, it doesn't matter whether it was Jack or the Journal of Interventional Cardiology or the Shma Journal. It'll get picked up and you'll get referenced and you'll get cited. So the choice of journals, and others may disagree with me, to me is less critical now, and shoot for a journal where you could get that paper published, because it'll be as apparent to doctors, clinicians, readers as New England Journal. Does everybody agree with that, or you?
No, I agree with that in the sense that if you're honest with what you did and you match it on a proper journal, you'll have a better chance of getting published faster than you work through that other process that we discussed earlier. And therefore, once it's published, yeah, a search is a search. It's going to go out no matter what.
Dr. Q just threw out a very, very important word. That word is honest. If you ever prove to be dishonest in what you're putting out to the public, your name will be forever blemished. Remember, honesty, above almost anything else, is your pedigree.
I think we should end with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much.